Welcome to another episode of the Data Science Leaders Podcast. I'm your host, Dave Cole. Today we have Mike Foley. Mike is the Senior Director of Data Science at Hitachi Vantara. Welcome, Mike, to the DSL Podcast.
Thanks, Dave. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
You bet. So, Mike, you have a very interesting career. You have built out data science teams from scratch a number of times. And I think that's one thing that we want to dive into. It is a topic that's come up a bit before on the DSL podcast, but I really think it's interesting, going about building a team from scratch and growing it out and introducing it into a company that might not have any sort of a data science practice to begin with. So I'd love to talk about that. Also, I think something that's unique about Mike is Mike had the sort of the revelation in his career that he needed to go back to school to sort of up his technical skills. So I want to uncover that because I think there's a lot of DSLs out there, not unlike myself back in the day, who was like, man, maybe do I really know everything I need to know to do this job? And maybe you don't, and maybe you should go back to school and that'll help you out in your career. And then last but not least, Mike has a particular expertise in marketing analytics and the marketing use cases. So we're gonna dive into that. That also happens to be a topic of mine that I enjoy. So without further ado, Mike, you've been at Hitachi Vantara. Before that, you were at Pure Storage, and before that, you were at Dell. And how many times have you built data science teams almost from scratch?
Well, so I've been working quite a while. Before it was called data science, around 2012. At Cisco, I was a manager of advanced analytics team. We called it advanced analytics, so I was a quant, an MBA at the time. Coming up, I was a marketing research manager and a database manager. We were just talking about at Hearst Corp before that. Right. But around 2012, I was recruited by some people I knew at Cisco to come over, and they owned Pivotal Labs. And that was when big data was just coming on the scene. And they said, we want you to come and start up a data science practice, be the director of data science. And I thought, man, that's a pretty pretentious name, at the time. I hadn't heard of it, but Pivotal was really pushing the envelope there. So that was the first time I came over, but I'd already done it before with an advanced analytics team over at Cisco, where I come in by myself. And now it's kind of a running joke with some of the CMOs that I've tagged along with in all these companies. And it's a running joke, like one of them was saying, man, you always go there, you have no data, no people, you just kind of land in these companies. And, for better or worse, it's definitely can be it's very stressful if you've only done it once, but once you've done it a bunch of times, you recognize the patterns. And so it's a lot less stressful, and you kind of have a method for coming in and ramping up and scaling, and I mean, we can talk about that.
Yeah, I want to hear about that method. So, you landed, let's say you landed at Hitachi Vantara. You're trying to find where the data is. Like, what is some of the things that are you really just yourself? I mean, I imagine if it's just you, then you're having to start with actually getting your hands dirty and you have nobody to manage. So you actually have to do some of the data science yourself, correct?
Yeah. So the CMOs I've fallen around with, one particular guy has a master's in computer science, so he really appreciates I have a lot of air cover with this guy and he also says, I've seen this movie before. He's seen what I've done each time, so I have a lot of equity in the bank before I come in.
Right.
And then the joke is, well, then you rust out. When you're leaving, you're pretty much an administrator because everything's running like a machine. You have people that are much closer to it than you are. A lot of it's administrative. But each time, like his joke is, well, you have to dust off the textbooks and, get out and start coding again. And, I'm always a little rusty. And also each time things have changed somewhat. So, I come in, the first thing I do is I want to assess the data. And around me, culturally, like people will say, well, you're a solution to a problem we don't know we have, because only the senior guy has this. He's a transformational guy. He wants to change things, but at the moment it's legacy. And by the way, there's like this big market for people that have the fortitude to go into these legacy companies and transform them. So I'm coming in and no one really knows what what I do, who I am, what have you. But the first thing is, a lot of exploratory data analysis.
Yeah.
What data do we have? What equipment? It's a lot of times there's no data lake. So you got to be the first guy to stand up the data lake.
Mhm.
What kind of shapes IT in a big company? Are they legacy relational database guys that don't understand anything about what you're going to want to do? Maybe territorial, maybe don't understand it, maybe are threatened by it. So the first thing is kind of look at the lay of the land with the data. But then you also, even though you're building for the long term and you want to scale, which means standing up a data lake, standing up the kind, like maybe Jupyter Hub, things, Kubernetes container, things you're going to have to work on later at scale.
Mhm.
You have to have some quick hits,
Right.
to kind of set the tone. And so those typically are, might be smaller things, might be some data mining that they haven't been able to blend data together in a meaningful way. You visualize those in Tableau.
Mhm.
It could be some quick forecasting. You just crank out some time series things. You find a need that they have initially, and although the whole suite, the portfolio, like we were talking about, is a formula for what you might need in marketing. You have these things that are just fundamental, and their books have been written about them, and eventually they're going to get around to all of them. But a lot of times there's an acute need at the beginning, like we need to generate more pipeline, we need to
Right.
have better targeting precision, that kind of thing. And so you can maybe make an impact there right away to kind of set the tone while you're building,
Right.
which means getting more people, getting that kind of
All
thing
right. So let me
going.
try to summarize here. I try to do this on the DSL podcast here, just for my own edit. It helps me understand and make sure I get this right. So, first of all, I think you have the benefit of having, it sounds like a CMO that you've worked with in the past who understands, with a computer science background, who understands the importance of being sort of data driven and using data analytics to improve your marketing efforts, right? Improve your efficiency, reduce your costs, et cetera. So that's helpful. Not everybody has somebody who's already sort of,
Right.
come to that realization, and they need to be won over. But that's the good news. However, my guess is, despite this CMO coming in with this mindset, there are still some people out there who might be like,
Right.
hey, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. What's going on here? It might be a
Right.
little bit reluctant to change, and that's when it sounds like you're going after, you're trying to find what that low hanging fruit, sort of acute need, and that's maybe the first project to go after. But before you do that, like, you have to really understand the business, and one way to go about that is that EDA step. So finding the data, making
Yeah.
sure you understand what's going on. And it sounds like even that first project may not need to be a model. It could just be like blending a few different data sources together and that never be blended
Right.
together because they don't have a data lake. And when you do that, then light bulbs go off, and I'll let you take it from there, because I summarized and maybe injected some of my own in there.
No, I mean, it's a good point. I mean, like when I landed at Hitachi, first thing I did was this really sophisticated media mix optimization.
Mm-hmm.
But I hadn't really listened because they weren't set up to execute on it, because they weren't running integrated campaigns at that time. So they're like, well, hey, Mike, this is great, but and it was something I go, God, it's been successful at Dell, it's been successful at, but we're not there yet, come back in a year kind of thing, with that. So I had to back off and really listen and think about what do they need right now, and give them find some early adopters.
Mm-hmm.
Like you say, even though you have an executive champion, your day-to-day is not with that person, so I had to find some people that were open to working in a new way. They didn't have a bunch of hangups about, hey, we've always been doing it the same way, because you touched on a point about the cultural aspects to it. Getting adoption, that is, in my mind, the hardest thing. Finding people that are not risk averse, that are willing to change, willing to take a new approach,
Right.
even to a certain extent where they may not understand it at all, right? And they're willing to trust it enough to try it. And then once you have those people, you have to communicate out that, hey, this worked, so other people feel comfortable. So that whole end of it is really, in my mind, the hardest.
So
The other stuff is all by the book.
can you give an example of, like, maybe a process, like a I don't know, maybe it was an approach to a type of a campaign, sort of a before or after, like before Mike and after Mike. Like, what are the types of changes that if 6 months after you've been at Hitachi or you've been at a company, I can expect to see from your handiwork?
Yeah, like typically a product launch, for example, in any of these companies, they will be trying to speculate about who should they sell it to among their customer base, but you can't hit everyone, right?
Mm-hmm.
And who do we want to acquire that are not customers? So that'll be a lot of expert opinion, business intuition, bunch of business rules. We're going to hit everyone in manufacturing,
Mm-hmm.
So one of the workhorses, and this goes way back, but now is on steroids because you have machine learning, a lot of data, is something called, for a layperson in marketing, a propensity to buy model, which is basically a statistical classifier. Who we're going to do telemarketing, and we need to know the top 1,000 prospects to call. We only have money for 1,000, and we need to direct our sales reps, the direct sales reps, to the top accounts that are most likely. And we need to make a forecast of how much we're going to make off this new product we're going to be launching. And all of these companies that I've been in do this. And so providing them a list of companies, customers, and prospects that are most likely, have the highest likelihood of purchasing that product, which, by the way, hasn't been launched yet. So you have to have a proxy, for those of you that are statisticians, something similar to use as the target. That is like key. And that's like that. People understand that can become a workhorse right away. You can just be cranking those out for all products. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, I think the picture you're painting is one where beforehand, folks are making sort of off the cuff business intuition,
Right.
sort of decisions. So, in terms of, which potential customers should you be marketing to, there's not a lot of science behind it, right? But then
Right.
you come in and you're like, no, there's a better way to do this, and all of this is in an effort to really become more efficient and cost effective, right? Because you could, if you had
Right.
unlimited time and unlimited money, you could blanket the marketable universe with your messaging, and you will just by happenstance hit all the right people, right, at the right time.
Right.
But you have to worry about them, of course. Saying, okay, why are you
Yeah.
spamming me? You're all over the place. This message, of course, there's a lot of waste there, right? You're sending.
Yeah.
So it's about being more targeted and being smarter. To me, if I was on the marketing team, I would be like, okay, this makes a lot of sense. Mike, how can you do that, right? And then so maybe
Right.
take it from there. So how are you explaining to a marketer why you're gonna, what a propensity model is and how that's
Yeah,
going to
yeah.
help them? Like, how do you do that?
Well, so the before is they'll come to you with a list and they say, we talk to everyone out in the field, and these are who they're nominating to contact for this product launch. And they come maybe with 1,000 prospects or customers. And it's just a list of names,
Mm-hmm.
just no data associated with it. But so what you return to them is, okay, we've got all those, we've ranked them, plus we've added to that with a bunch of other accounts, and we're giving you classification from very likely to purchase to neutral to buy, for example. But not only that, on that file is going to be maybe 50 columns of other data that's really relevant, like text mining to find out what their key care-abouts are, what have they purchased in the past, what social media have they been looking at, like intent scores from like a Bombora or a syndicated third-party data,
Mm-hmm.
what's a competitive install, what's their competitive presence, all those kinds of things you can append by doing a bunch of data blending, which goes back to our earlier discussion about just
So the EDA,
quick hits by
yeah.
bringing together disparate sources of data
Mm-hmm.
for a really rich profile. Because to a marketer, knowing about your customer is everything. So now you just don't have the initial list like you're before, with just a black box. These are names that we don't know why they put them there. That was their opinion out in the field,
Mm-hmm.
wherever they were, some country somewhere, to a consolidated list that's ranked from top to bottom with a ton of profiling information. So if telemarketers calling in or account managers walking in, they have a pretty complete profile as well as the likelihood of purchase.
Right. And are you
So that is, anyway, that's kind of transformational for them, you
T-
know.
Totally. But are you doing any sort of experimental design? Are you doing any testing to show them the old versus
Yeah,
the new
yeah.
way? Or are you just like, we're doing this in the new way, and
Well,
just take, trust me, it's going to be better.
that is a that is a really good point. So right at the beginning, they might go, well, why are you saying this person's going to
Yeah.
purchase?
Like, how
But
do
if
you
you're
know?
using
Yeah.
machine
Yeah.
learning
Yeah.
technique, right, you can't, you might be using 2,000 features, so you can't just say this one, no one's dominant. But what you are doing, of course, is training and testing, right? So you're doing a lot of train, test, K-fold cross-validation. So you say, well, look at the training set and look at when we test it, I'm getting 80% accuracy. A lot of
Mm-hmm.
times we're getting like 70, 80%, which is textbook. And by porting in just more and more data to get and doing a lot of transformation and a lot of data engineering to squeak the highest precision we can get out of the model, right? So you might show them a ROC curve, and here's how accurate it is. So we've trained, we tested, we feel pretty good it's going to generalize. We explain some of that. Don't want to overfit. And so then they feel really confident going out, or it helps them feel
Doesn't
better
feel
that
better. Yeah.
that we know it's going to be precise. But then afterwards, like the first one we do, like the first one at Hitachi was for something called the Jupiter launch, a big launch for them. But afterwards, later, sales ops went back, who we were working with, some business analysts there, and validated, looked at the scores, looked at who had purchased, and came back like independent arbiter and did kind of retrospective that, hey, look at these guys really performed as expected, more very likely purchase than the neutral to buy. So
Right.
then people were more confident to do it again and put more wood behind the arrow.
Right, right. No, that makes a lot of sense. I think we sort of gloss over sometimes the testing aspect of it. I think data scientists naturally do it themselves, but like that reporting back of the results, good or bad, is a key component, right, to the whole
Yep.
process, and that's the best way really to let the data prove out bear out the truth as to whether or not it actually helps. So now that you've gotten this first project under your belt, right? I imagine that the wood behind the arrow also involves additional funding to your team and to be able to grow out the team,
Yeah.
and obviously additional projects hopefully that you can go after. So you having been in marketing for quite some time, know what these projects might be, and is it you who's teeing them up, or do you see other sort of folks on the marketing side come to you with ideas, or do you still feel like you're sort of just having run this play a few times, you're the one who's sort of starting with the ideas?
Well, typically they come at some point. It's each one of these. Uh, they're going to have their own unique needs,
Right.
right? Like one company might be super concerned about getting control of their sales pipeline and understanding it. Another company might be saying, shoot, we're just spamming, and we're getting in too many leads, we're not converting them. We need more targeting precision,
Mm-hmm.
or we need more relevant communication to our customers. We need a segmentation scheme or personalization on the web, like at Dell,
Mm-hmm.
So there's going to be a heavier emphasis on one of the things, whether it's targeting precision like propensity to buy, or then predicting the next likely purchase for cross-sell upsell, or segmentation for relevant communication, or web personalization, or forecasting to get control of the business. Those would probably be the 5 big areas,
Mm-hmm.
and each one will be like the lead dog in the whole thing, and you probably end up getting resources against that because they'll want to just scale, and in a way that can become almost an obsessive thing where you turn into just a forecasting machine or targeting machine,
Right.
like Cisco, where I was initially, we did like maybe 14 propensity to buy models, but now they have like 60,000, and it's just a
Wow.
machine cranking them out.
Yeah.
Many years later, they brought in people that wanted to scale it, where for us it was like a science experiment,
Yeah.
at the beginning, right? Just one little classification tree before machine learning was even out there.
Right.
Same, another company is just pure forecasting. But then you do have the opportunity to suggest things like, hey, we can do media mix optimization. We do these other things too. And I have kind of a boilerplate slide showing the different things, trying to translate them into marketing speak. Like, hey, here's where we come from, applied statistics and computer science. Here's the techniques we might use. And when you're saying I want next likely purchase, we're translating that into association rules, you know. And so kind of giving a diagram of the translation layer of the typical marketing problems like customer profiling and how you would address that with a certain technique, and then where you come from. So it's kind of a three-stage waterfall that actually a marketer that I worked for, he suggested that, because he goes, if you're walking around talking about support vector machine or what have you, or k-means or whatever, people aren't going to understand what you're talking about. So you have to translate that into these things that marketers ask for, like give me the next likely purchase. You know what I mean? So,
right. So you're not just showing them the results, you're also showing them a bit on sort of how you make the cake, what ingredients go into the cake and how you make the cake, so that they can better understand it and sort of meet you a little bit on their side and understanding the approach that you're taking and some of the so because I've seen certainly in my career folks sort of eyes glass over, right, when you start diving into the details, and they're just like, can you just get to the so what? Right.
Totally.
But so there is an art to being able to explain it but not going into so much detail. Do you find that that turns into, like, as your number of projects and your team grows, that is kind of your job, or are you hiring data scientists with the expectation that they're able to be very strong communicators as well? Or do you feel like, and that's kind of your job, is to do some of the translating?
Well, it's ironic, that my undergrad degree was English and I started out as a marketer because, there's a translation layer above me now, because I've become I just went down the rabbit hole. And, so for me, even, I remember at Cisco sitting there with this one guy, it was a staff meeting. He goes, Mike, we're going to talk to you, but we just don't say a word. Just listen to what we want. Don't say anything.
Okay.
Because they were just like, whatever I said coming back they just wanted to tell me what they wanted, and not hear, and just, it'll come out. So even for me, I lapse into, because you're trained as a data scientist to be real precise. I remember a professor said business people speak in metaphors, but in data science, you have to have precision. So I do speak to the business sometimes, and it's kind of funny because I'll be with data scientists that are like mathematicians or whatever, and I'll kind of have to say, I know you're going to be laughing at me when I say this, that the duck is going to hunt the hound, things that, some kind of metaphor, right, that a business person, the pollution going into the data lake,
right.
The person that a marketer will understand, right? Because in their minds they're going, oh my God, here he goes again. Because the minute you generalize, you lose all the precision. You're just making these gross generalizations, but that's what you have to do for the business. But even for me now, I typically have people around me that are not part of our team, that are like the applied people that will do a lot of the, they call for the layperson, like go out and train on our stuff and that kind of stuff. So more and more, I'm kind of like in the data science with the data scientists, and then, talking to a small group of people that go out to the wider group, if that makes sense.
Right.
But also it's to protect our bandwidth, because if you only have a few data scientists, you don't want them in a ton of meetings,
right,
and you don't want them out there wasting their time on anything. If you have to repeat over and over again to marketers, different groups, different meetings, that can be a huge bandwidth sink.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, of course. So just to cap off building out these teams, I mean, understand the need for, clearly you understand the space, right? In the marketing space extremely well, having been a marketer yourself, and you're rattling off different types of use cases that where data science can help marketers. But in terms of the organization that you're building, I'm obviously the first hire, and my guess is you're hiring data scientists around you, right? So
yeah,
that's
absolutely.
your first hire. But totally. At what point is there some point where you add on other roles, right? I mean, you have to add on an additional management role, but are there any other different types of roles like that you look for?
Yeah, I mean, I always keep it flat, so I don't ever have a second level management. I have a senior principal data scientist, different hierarchies, even if I'm reporting directly to CMO or whatever, I would never never have another layer, unless it would be a different functional area, like operational reporting, like at Cisco or something.
Right.
So, but back to the data scientists and something you mentioned earlier, you want someone that has theoretical understanding of applied statistics, so they know a good from a bad model, what the data is saying. So that you really want to look at in school. You get that out of school. So that's important, and they have to be able to code, to a certain extent. It's not like somebody offshore that has to be really fast in one language, or but it's not about speed or not having to look it up, but knowing what you can do and being able to do it in like R or Python or what have you.
Right.
Something modern, maybe not in an older, language.
Proprietary language. Yeah.
Or yeah. And then the third thing is communication skills, being able to package up for the business. Now, a recruiter will go, you're never going to get all three, a lot of cases. So, you might have to sacrifice communication skills, for example. If you get that, that's just a huge bonus, because, then they can do their own prezos and they can go to meetings on their own, and this is golden. But at the end of the day, you need somebody that can crank out the work. And it's nice that they have some experience in like marketing, domain experience to just know, hey, I understand what a responder is, or I understand what a lead is,
Right.
But if not, those things can be learned on the job, the communication skills, the domain, but you're not going to learn statistics on the job. That you got to come in with, or be, and constantly be improving on those areas. Right. So that's what you look for. And then as you get bigger, to your point, you want data engineers, because you don't want your predictive modelers consumed with building data pipelines and a lot of pre-processing. And good data engineers from a computer science background, they can do a lot of text mining, a lot of, they can build crawlers for you, a lot of capabilities. More statistician type person might not be that good at, so then you become more specialized. Data engineers, data scientists and stuff.
So you mentioned schooling, right? And you mentioned this is something you can't really learn on the job. You yourself had a moment and sort of a realization. When was that, and when did you decide to go back to school, and how did you do that? I mean, you've had a long career, and I think it can be daunting, right, to somebody who's now a data science leader, or even been a data scientist for quite some time, to come to that realization and think, gosh, my day job already takes up, 50, 60 hours a week, and you heap on additional time to go back to school. That's a lot of work. So how did you do it?
Yeah, I actually, it was kind of a moment in time. I mean, I know I mentioned it to you once. So I was recruited at EMC by marketers, CMOs, and at the time, I was typical MBA quant. I learned my, I got my MBA way back, and so doing time series regression, forecasting sales and stuff. You learn that in business school, maybe some segmentation and stuff. And so in that world, pre-data science, I was pretty good as an analyst. As a business analyst, and from an advanced analytics standpoint, adequate and stuff. So I was recruiting EMC, and they go for, right then was data science was starting to happen, and we're going to bring you as a data science person. And, from their perspective, I was great, from a CMO perspective. And, so I brought in a couple other people. And one day I was trying to model purchasers for particular area of flash storage, and I was having some problems. I was using a classification tree, as I recall, but in the same time, my older son was in grad school studying statistics, and now it just so happens he's a senior data scientist at a big company now, and quite good. And I was on the phone with him going, man, I'm building this classification tree, it's just I'm not getting any good results, do you have any advice? He was in school at the time, and and he goes, well, have you tried random forest? And I'm like, what? Random forest? He goes, yeah, what about support vector machine? I'm like, what? Gradient boosting machine. He started rattling off these names. I'm like, what are you talking about? And, it was that, that was the beginning of machine learning becoming practical in business, because of the cheap, data storage was a lot cheaper than when I was at Cisco, where you're spending $90,000 a terabyte. All of a sudden, storage was almost infinite. compute was going up, ensemble modeling.
Yeah.
And, just in that conversation, it dawned on me that, hey, man, things are changing, and something is changing here. And then at the same time, one of the data scientists was going back to school at the same time as well. And I remember signing off on reimbursing her on her education. And I thought, man, I could do this too. And when I started, it was very humbling because, I was with a bunch of kids, but I realized I was not as good as I thought I was at all. So that was an eye opener, but also very exhilarating, to be exposed to all the new stuff that's happening right now that a lot of people in it take for granted because I come from a area where things were, much, much different, So there's an exhilaration to that.
Right.
And that kind of was transformational, definitely.
Right. And you got your Master of Science from Northwestern. Was that was like an evening course, or did you actually take some time off? That was an evening course. Okay, so
evening online. You could go in physically or do it online, and so I did that while I was working.
Right.
And company reimbursed me for it. And they questioned at the time. They go, Mike, you're good enough. Why would you want to go back? At your point in this career, maybe expand and get into event marketing and other things. But it turned out to be a good decision.
You can always get better, just like our models can always get more accurate.
Oh,
yeah.
Totally.
Well, that's great. I mean, that had to have been. I mean, obviously, you mentioned your son. You have a family, and I know that just time is precious, and the fact that you were able to carve out time and make that happen, I think, is a testament to your passion for the craft of data science. And I think I'd love to see it. Like I have never been a believer that in the stupid adage that an old dog can't learn new tricks. Not to say that you're old, but just to say that like you can't go back and keep learning.
Sometimes I do. Yeah. Sometimes I feel definitely old, but it's exhilarating.
Yeah.
It just is kind of to see all the cool stuff that's happening now, and ever since then, because there was a big lag between the two graduate school times. The lesson I learned was to always be studying, like now I just try and keep up because I never want to get that far behind again, and I realize it's just constantly is changing, and every time I make a leap into a new company, something's different. So, and that's, I know that's not for everyone because, it takes a lot of energy to keep up in this space,
Yes.
And so that kind of like kind of Darwinian where it selects the people that survive are the ones that really thrive on that,
Yeah. But I mean, for the hard skills, I think to be, to build a high performing data science team, you have to be you have to be in the know. I mean, and there are ways to do that. I mean, going back to, formal training is certainly, I think, one of the best. But obviously there's plenty of literature to be had. There's plenty of websites. There's plenty of things that you can read up on. You can take courses on your own. Et cetera. And I know if I were a member of your team, it would be, it'd be great to see, my manager, come to that realization, like he or she is probably giving me great advice, from a life coach, from a career standpoint, obviously, working well with the business side, but that recollection that like, hey, those hard skills might be getting a little bit stale and it's time for me to do a refresh. There's a lesson to be learned there. Like, we all need to think about that, and think critically about our hard skills and what we've learned. Last thing to segue into, you have a lot of knowledge and you've dropped a lot of use cases already, and from a marketing standpoint. And if let's say you're a data scientist right now or a DSL, and you want to engage with the marketing team. Perhaps you're working, I don't know, on the manufacturing side or something like that, and you want to get more. Like, where would you start? Would you start with the propensity to buy model, or like what do you think is like the low hanging fruit, like no brainer area from a marketing standpoint to start?
Well, I think definitely that, or like a next likely purchase among your, because say you're in engineering, you have exposure to a lot of data. And so you might have customer data, or you're in finance, you might have information and a perspective, because marketing is the biggest user of everyone else's data and everyone else's information, right? We're the biggest secondary user. So you can come in from a different area and bring a perspective on the customer that marketing might not have. So, I've seen people like in engineering that were data scientists come in and go, hey, man, we were looking at usage in the engineering space of the products, and, we predict these people will be ready to buy.
Right.
Just a different perspective than we had. Definitely the kinds of things that marketing thinks about is cross-sell, upsell. So predicting the probability of purchasing a specific product, but like cross-sell, upsell could be all the products,
Mm-hmm.
or can you give a different perspective on things, a segmentation scheme that they using different features about the customer, like they call in for service calls and they're dissatisfied. Now their sentiment, do you do sentiment analysis to say these customers are unhappy because they call into our service center and they're pissed, That's something a marketer is not going to be exposed to, so you can be in an entirely different department and come in with a model that gives them a perspective they can act on. If you can translate that into, like, you can
Yeah.
come in from finance and go, look at your pipeline's bad. You're going to be in bad shape in a year. We don't look, and marketing might not be looking that far out, and they don't see enough of the financials.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So anyway, I think that those kinds of things like segmentation, propensity to buy, next likely purchase, can you recommend a purchase? Can you give if you're running some of the hardware and IT, a way to implement models that is through the machines that you run that are customer facing that marketing doesn't have access to. So there's all those kinds of things, I think,
Right.
that, if that makes
Yeah,
sense,
yeah.
that,
I mean,
a
I
marketer
know
could use.
there's also, marketing attribution. So, attributing a sale back to whatever channel or even a campaign. I know that one's
Channels.
a very tricky one, not for the faint of heart.
No, I'm working on that now.
Yeah.
That's a personal project of mine, that I'm doing myself right now for this company.
Good. Yeah. Good luck with that one. Some of the other ones that you described,
Yeah,
just
always
from my
hard.
own knowledge and background, are a lot easier than the attribution one. The attribution one can be quite challenging. So I would not start there if you're.
No, I mean,
yeah. Media mix modeling maybe, but yeah.
Yeah, and attribution is politically sensitive because you have people
Yeah.
that are responsible for all those channels. There's a lot of dynamics around it that are not just the model itself.
Yeah.
Can you? And so there's that's very complex, as you mentioned.
What makes it so challenging? Yeah, what Mike's saying is just the number of variables that you're really trying to look across the entire marketing efforts for a period of time, and trying to understand like what marketing efforts are driving the most value and where should you be spending more money. And that's very, I mean, like you said, that's very politically charged, because there are folks who are responsible for doing the direct marketing, they're responsible for doing the brand marketing, et cetera, et cetera. And you're helping to shape budgets in a way, and there just be so many external factors, seasonality, and competitors. It's very hard. So
and this goes way back, this idea of the synergy of a media mix, and back in the 90s you'd use mainframes and linear programming to do that, but that's always been around, and things are so much more complex now with media fragmentation and marketing, all the myriad of marketing channels, that it's never like one thing, the last touch or the first touch. They're the interplay of all the different media, and you want to give them the weight of the impact they have within the media mix, because if you take out one of the inner pieces, you're going to jeopardize the end result. So it gets, like you said, very complex, and then you have the costs of all of them and the ROI. But that is definitely a data science problem. And, every company wants that, right? It's like the Holy Grail.
Everybody wants the answer to it, but getting to it is very difficult. I mean, what Mike's trying to do some translation here, but when Mike's talking about first touch, last touch, that's the, so if I don't know, if I'm not a customer and you want to make me a customer, should you attribute that first marketing touch, all the credit for me eventually becoming a customer, if I become a customer, or only the last touch, or there's some weighted approach where you might not be touched once or twice, might be 15 times before you eventually become a customer. So how, which of those touches was sort of the critical to getting me over the hump and becoming a customer, or is it some combination? And it's very difficult, and there's not like a clear right answer. I think there are some that are approaches that are better than others. But we're going to a bit of an attribution, talking about rat holing, a bit of an attribution rat hole. But I think there's lots of great advice that, Mike, that you gave in terms of not just today, in terms of building out teams, but also in terms of just being aware and about the hard skills and them becoming stale, and you knowing that you need to go back. There's no shame in it. Do it, learn. It's fun. It's a great way to stay current, and obviously it helps you out throughout your career. And then we talked a bit about some of those marketing use cases to cut your teeth on if you haven't gone into and done marketing related use cases before. So, Mike, if people want to get in touch with you and talk shop, can they reach out to you on LinkedIn, or are there any other ways?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, love to talk about it.
Great.
Always learn something as a result.
Yeah,
so that's cool.
I'm the same way. Anytime you teach somebody something, you're always going to learn something just in that exchange. So, Mike, I really appreciate you taking the time. Thanks for joining the DSL podcast.
Oh, it was a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
You bet. Take
Talk
care.
to you soon.